Welcome to a brand new episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem, the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry through interviews with some of your favorites in the business. For this episode, I was joined by Dave Heilman from the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Our awesome interview included Dave chatting about Dynasty Prize Check, the live Scott Fishbowl draft in Cincinnati, the Fantasy Football Expo experience, going to the NFL Combine, and lots more. Make sure you're following Dave on Twitter at Dynasty Dorks. Follow me on Twitter at DKCKasem and the podcast at GetReal_pod. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now, here's my conversation with Dave Heilman on Get Real with Kacey Kasem. I edit this fun stuff to start with, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so I'm so excited to have you here. I say I'm excited every time somebody comes on, but honestly, I am because, Dave, you're here and you've been a guy that I've seen on my Twitter, feed constantly. I'm seeing it on my timeline and it's awesome to see your work and everything. But I wanted to get you on. You had me on your podcast, which was really awesome, and just really was excited that we could work something out to get you on. So very excited about that. And I know the listeners that are listening right now probably want to know, like, who is this guy and how did he get started even playing fantasy football? So go ahead and take it away. How did you come across fantasy football in the first place?
Yeah, so like most of us, like football first, and then started to learn a little bit about fantasy football, played it a little bit in high school, middle school, and in college, it definitely took off of just a way to make the games more exciting on Sunday. And so it's a game within the game. And so that was something we did. And when you graduate from either high school or college, there's a lot of different ways to keep in touch with your friends. And fantasy football really kind of was that outlet for us. And so it was for fun. Of course, we had put a little bit of money on it just for keep it a little bit more serious. But it's more about being able to do the drafts, talk crap, pay attention to your team, make fun of your buddies, and just have fun. Use the chat to really keep in touch with your friends.
That's awesome. And have you ever done a live draft with them, or how was the draft situation with them?
Yeah, live drafts were much easier in college, much easier when, people didn't have kids or didn't live so far away. But live drafts are absolutely fun. I remember doing a double live draft at my house. My first team was definitely better than my second team. I think I drafted like 2 kickers, didn't really keep track of my board. But we had, I had the place packed and we had just a party going on, 2 drafts going on. And it was just so much fun. If you have not experienced a live draft, you definitely have to. The Expo is absolutely a way to do that.
For sure. And we'll talk about the Expo because it always comes up on this podcast, but it's a really awesome tool for the community as a whole, for fantasy football community. And we'll get into that. But going back to just growing up and loving football, and did you have love for football from an early age? And if so, what kind of relationship did you have with football?
Yeah, kind of the Sandlot story. Like, my dad wasn't into football and sports. He was into like NASCAR and racing. And I'm just sitting on the porch and the kid across the street's like, "Hey, you want to play football?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "Yeah, this guy has no clue what he's doing." And his dad happened to run the Pee Wee Football League. And so the kid would just take me on we'd go in the driveway and practice how to throw a ball and practice how to catch. And Phil Hornbeck, he actually taught me how to play and then got me to join the Pee Wee Football League and got to do all those things. So just played it and loved football other than over the other sports.
And did you watch like a specific NFL team growing up, or did you have any sort of allegiance towards a team?
Yeah, I mean, we're all like guilty of this. We pick our favorite team when we're like 5 or 6 years old. And whether it's family loyalty or something random, for me, it was like I had a shirt that said Giants were the 86 champs. I was born in 86. And then my favorite movie was Little Giants. And so that's why I'm a Giants fan.
Okay, I like it. I like it a lot. I'm a Cowboys fan, so I don't like the aspect of you being, but it's okay because I the story's great and I you love to hear it. You love to hear it. So back to the fantasy football aspect of your life, just getting started playing fantasy football. So watching football and playing fantasy football are two completely different things. Playing fantasy football when you first started, were you concerned about anything? Did you have any questions? How did you go into playing fantasy for the first time?
I was younger, so it was just, you go out there and you play. I think, it was um there's no strategy involved. You just took players and you took players you liked. And I remember taking like Drew Brees in the first round, probably a bad idea, but like just having fun with it, taking players you liked, and then getting to cheer for those players was more what I was trying to do.
And when you play fantasy football, at the time, how were the settings for that league? Can you remember?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had PPR at that point. I'm not, I didn't grow up in the standard ages, and I was not. I talked to Greg Kellogg, and he told me about when they used to have to mail their lineups in. I couldn't imagine people with this Kelsey news what they'd be doing.
Yeah, right.
They didn't have Thursday Night Football, maybe, but yeah, they had to mail it or fax their stuff in. So I didn't have to do that. We played Yahoo or ESPN leagues, and sometimes I played, with random people in the mock, in the lobbies and stuff, but mainly it's family and friends.
And when did you find out that you could start putting out information about fantasy football for other people to consume? How did you come across the content part of fantasy football?
That was definitely later on. So, after college, after everything, my buddies and I we had kind of a group chat, and we were always talking about stuff, and we said, hey, we're going to start something. So we started a website, called it Dynasty Dorks, and quickly realized it's a lot of work. And so I ended up taking it and running with it, and everybody else kind of was like, all right, you can have it. We're good. And then I just wrote a little bit, just got, on social media, didn't really get too serious about it. Just, but it was nice to see. And then once I saw Twitter, I was like, wow, there's so much out there.
So writing a little bit, had you ever written anything before? Was this your first jump into doing something like that?
Yeah, the first time, never did any articles or anything like that before.
So how did you prepare yourself to start putting out content like that? What were your first steps when you're first starting out on your journey?
Yeah, so it was, trying to watch YouTube videos and read articles and try to, learn from other people. And then, it's probably a year or two before I actually did a podcast. But it was more just live and learn as you go. And when you're doing your own thing, you don't have as many issues with like, SEO and WordPress and some of the other stuff, the timelines and things like that. And so when I started working for other companies, that's when I started to get more polished and have to learn, you have to learn the rules of the game.
And you brought up Twitter being something that you came across and found with this whole fantasy football space that's going on there. How did you stumble across that?
It was my buddy. He's the one that created Dynasty Dorks. It wasn't even me. It was my buddy Danny, and he just one day we talked about it. We never did it. And then one day he's like, "Hey guys, I just signed us up. I got a Twitter handle." He was always a joke. He said, "Hey, there's Dynasty Nerds," and I was like, "Oh," and now I realize who they are and how big they are. And then we had a little website on Wix. And so you learn how to do that. And then, you kind of learn as you go.
And Dynasty is a completely different thing than redraft, obviously. How did you decide on like taking the leap from redraft to going into Dynasty?
Yeah. So I moved to North Carolina for a little bit, and I came home. And when I came home, I was like, I'm going to go visit a bunch of single, no kids. I'm going to visit a bunch of family and friends and do all that. And so I visited my cousin, and her husband actually was really into Dynasty. So that he's the one that introduced me to it. And I was always someone that, like, when I played Madden, I was always franchise mode. And so like instantly was like, yeah, this is better. I like this. I like both, like it's not that I dislike redraft, but I'd like the dynasty aspect and just kind of took off from there.
And was it hard to kind of turn on and turn off your dynasty brain and your redraft brain, or how did you figure out how to balance
Oh
that
man,
out?
we were so stupid when we started, when it comes down to like, when I say stupid, it's just you have that redraft brain and you're so stuck in it. And so you say things or do things that now I would, laugh at myself for saying, but you just do them. And so, it's like in a dynasty league, like I did one the other day and it was a couple guys' first time doing it. And I was like, hey, just, want to share with you guys the ECR and some different things to give you guys a little bit of a understanding of how the rankings might differ from redraft. It's up to you whether you want to read it or take the advice or not. And, the guy, I'm like, he's texting me, I'm like, man, it seems pretty old, like your average running back age is like 28. Like, it's not good, and then, but being able to have things like Dynasty GM or Dynasty Daddy and other things that can give you the like reality of your team. You might be like, man, this team's really good. And it's like, yeah, your team's probably going to be good this year, but like you literally like might have like to retire all your players next year.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my first draft was just like, oh, I mean, they're good, right? Yeah. But did you see how old they are? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. Turn that off. Okay. Turn that part on. So are you one of those people that keeps track of how many leagues you're in, or no, are you in a bunch of leagues, or how many leagues are you in?
Yeah, I'm in too many. I only have a couple apps, so I can at least keep track of it that way. And so, like, of course, I got like 3 or 4, maybe 5 charity leagues. So those like I don't necessarily count, but like dynasty leagues, I think I'm in 10. Right before the show, I got a text message. Hey man, last minute, I need someone to pick up an orphan, and I'm like, man, I probably shouldn't. But what's the settings? What's the buy-in?
Yeah.
Orphans are fun. For those that don't know what that is, it's a team that's been abandoned and you adopt it and fix it.
Yeah, and fix it, or at least try. And yeah, most of the time they are in need of some overhaul for sure.
Most of the time they're pretty bad. Pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, I may have orphaned a team, and it was it was
You
it
weren't
happens.
proud of it.
I was not. I wasn't proud of it, but it happens. So back to just fantasy football and settings. Do you have a specific, like, perfect kind of league right now that you like to play in?
Yeah, my preference is definitely going to be super flex leagues. And so, I'm definitely not someone to argue against somebody about their like opinion. So if somebody doesn't like something and that I like, I don't care. But I do think it is a silly argument when someone says that superflex fantasy football is not realistic. And I'm like, so first of all, it's fantasy football.
Yeah.
Second of all, like, is it realistic for your kickers and quarterbacks to be drafted in the same round? Like, it's not really realistic if you could literally get your starting quarterback with the last pick of your draft. But Superflex for me is something I've definitely took on the last couple of years, and I feel like it's becoming, it's like PPR. It's becoming the norm for especially Dynasty.
So when you put out content, what is your favorite kind of content to put out? Whether that be like the form of content that you're putting out, or like the topic that you like to talk or write about?
I mean, I definitely like podcasts and like to do long podcasts and have different conversations. But I think the short form content is fun because I can literally like get the Travis Kelce news today, and you could be anywhere. You don't need to have anything. Just grab my phone, boom. Hey, this is what's going on, and then just post it. And you can post it everywhere you want, and get news out to people quickly. Like there's a lot of people, whether it's TikTok or other places, are like, they're not on Twitter, and they're like, how'd you know this already? I'm like, listen, if you're on Twitter, you're gonna know stuff a lot faster. So get on Twitter. But like, I like short form content. The other day I did a 20-minute video of just my favorite player of every round. And so like for me, that's the content I like because I don't necessarily always have an hour. And so 15-minute, walk, run, whatever, you can knock out a show.
And so with podcasting, how did you actually start podcasting, and had you ever done podcasting prior to that?
No. And I was super nervous about doing it. And so like I had a couple people that I interacted with on Twitter were like, hey, can you come on my show? Or, hey, I got this going on. And I was just like politely like, no, I'm good. And it was always an excuse like I'm busy or I have this going on. And then Nick P2W was my buddy. And he was like, come on, man. Like, you got to do it. He's like, if you ever want to come on, just come on. I got a show going on tomorrow night. And I was like, all right, let's just do it. I think it was right before maybe COVID. And, it was like, let's just do it. And so did it, had a lot of fun. And then it's kind of one of those things like the more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
For sure.
And then once I started getting on the show with like Michael Florio and Marcus Grant and like those guys, and I'm like, okay, I can do this, like it's definitely, and it's a good way for you to get yourself out there, being able to do more than one thing.
Yeah, definitely. Guesting is something that I did too prior to putting out a podcast, just because I kind of wanted to, but I wasn't sure if I really like it or not. And seeing how everybody does their podcast differently, like even the behind the scenes stuff is really cool to see. So you kind of pick up tips and tricks that way. Is there anything that you wish you would have known when you first started putting out content that you know now?
Oh man. Yeah. Definitely a lot of stuff. Number one, what you just said, like if you stay inside your little box, it's the whole fishbowl theory, like you're not ever going to grow. And so, get out there and do as much stuff as possible. As long as you have the time to do it. So it's taking the opportunities, whether somebody's inviting you on a show, whether it's going in and just enjoying other people's content and watching other people's content. Like I definitely try to consume other people's content, not only for like my knowledge as far as like listening to what people are talking about and things like that, but you learn things. And I'm like, oh, I like how they did their intro, or I like how they did segments in their show and they broke it up with this and that. Like there's definitely things that you can do where, at the end of the day, I'm gonna try to put content out that I like.
Right.
And so if I'm listening to it, I'm like, man, Kate, I like Kacey does that. Then I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna try to do that.
Totally. Totally. And when you first get started podcasting too, you don't really know like, what do I need? How do I get started? And all of that fun stuff that comes with learning. So how did you go about figuring out what you needed to do in order to podcast successfully?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was listening and being kind of giving yourself some honest feedback. Like trying to find ways to get better. And so when you look at it and say, okay, we did a show and we talked for 25 minutes and we got through 6 players. Like, I didn't like that. How can we do better? It's like, okay, well, what can I do better? And it's like every time that Kacey mentions a player, I don't need to go and jump on and mention it too. And a lot of times we're just saying the same stuff twice. Finding out your bad habits, whether it's, saying like I just did, saying finding ways to avoid those kind of things are really helpful. So like I said, it's not only looking at your entire podcast, but trying to be self-critical, and if you're going to be serious about it.
And podcasting with other people and having guests on too, and having that kind of interaction when there's various voices going on. How do you make sure that the podcast comes out smoothly and that people don't talk over each other and things like that?
Communication is important. So I do like to get the group together a couple, minutes before the show. Say, all right, whenever I have a question, I'm going to end the question with a name. So I'm going to say, all right, let's talk about our favorite receivers. Kacey, who do you got? And so that it's you. I've started shows off and been like, how's everyone doing? and then it's either nobody talks or everybody talks. And so if you as the host, you're the one directing the show, and so people are waiting for your lead. And so you want to lead by example. And so using names has always been the easiest. So I'll start off with introducing everybody, putting together a short little show sheet, or doing something that just lets everyone know what it is, or just a text and just saying, hey, Kacey, tonight we're going to do this, this, and this. You cool with it? And then making sure you know what people want to be called. If someone goes by Dave instead of David, or, trying to do those things, it's important you say people's names correctly and things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that name thing, keeping people on track. I don't even notice it, but I could see how it would get hard kind of just going. Yeah. So that's totally good. Good idea. Good idea. And,
Yeah. If you have more than two people on there, just two people is hard enough. But if you get like 3 or 4 people, people just, they're just talking over each other. And so I always try to do that, and then tell them, like, when they're done, I'll ask, hey, Matt, do you have anything else to add to that? John, do you have anything to add before we move on to the next player?
So with your podcast and podcasting in general, how did you get to where you are now? And then let the audience, let the listener, because we're here for you. And I know you guys want to know, Dave, what's the background? How'd you get where you are now? What are you exactly? What is your title, quote unquote?
Yeah, I'm the lead Dynasty analyst for Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And so Sports Gambling Podcast Network has a whole lot of channels, from everything from tennis to tennis gambling to racing gambling to a lot of gambling. But they also got fantasy football, and we have 9 different shows on our channel. And so I'm the Dynasty host, the lead Dynasty writer, and I do our rankings. And so I didn't start with them. So I actually started, like I said, did my own thing for a little while. And it's funny, actually, like, my guys bailed right before the season, so I had to recruit some people, and I recruited like some really good talent. And so it was Matt Hicks, Ryan Searfoss, a couple other guys that were writing for us. And when the season was over, my son was about to be born, so I kind of wrapped things up, took a hiatus for a little bit. And then after he was like 2 years old, I got back into it. Then I worked for Pro Football Network. I was approached by Josh Houts. And so I was doing those, managing their content, fantasy football content, help recruit some people, just talked about, like, okay, this is when we talk about this in Dynasty. This is the time of the year to talk about this, to make sure we were keeping on top of not only trending topics, but doing stuff that's relevant to us now. We're not going to talk about the draft in March. We're going to talk about free agency in March, and then the draft in April. And then after Pro Football Network, I went back to do my own thing. And so I was doing my own thing for a little while, trying to promote myself, open the website back up. I had a job board. And so I did a fantasy football job board on my website. It was just one page, and I just put it out there. Everybody, if you got a job, tell me and I'll post it. If you got a resume, throw it out there, and let's try to get people connected. And so, and then I did open mic night on Fridays. And so I would just go on there, and sometimes I would just drop the link on Twitter, which I know is dangerous, but I would just be like, anybody that wants to come on. I have people sign up for it. And so if you got a new product, a new article, a new podcast, whatever, you come on, and just, it's all about you. And so I would do, try to promote people. Sometimes we'd have 10 people show up. Sometimes we just me.
That is super rad. That's a super awesome concept. That's a super awesome idea. And that's, I didn't know that. So that's really dope. And connecting with people is important. And the space, there's a lot of people in the fantasy football community. I know I haven't even touched the surface of how many people there are in this space, but you had brought up the Fantasy Football Expo earlier, and I just wanted to know more about that kind of experience and what it was like for you, how many times you've been, et cetera, et cetera. But what was that experience like for you as a person who's actually been there?
Yeah. And so first of all, like I love what you're doing, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here. And so I've always had that mentality of like, you have to help other people out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love what you're doing. And that was always like, I would always be like, Kacey, if you want to come on my show, like I want to talk about you first, you know? And so like for the expo, I just, it was definitely, I was a little nervous last year when I was going, because I didn't, you don't know,
Right.
because you see these people on Twitter and stuff like that, but you don't know how they're going to, interact in real life. And, it was so cool. Like, everybody's so nice, no matter how big or small their following is, no matter if big company by themselves, just a fan. Like, people were really humble. People are there willing to help. And I remember listening to Fantasy Pros on the way up, and I'm listening to Pat Fitzmaurice, and I go there, and the first person I see at the bar is Pat. And I'm like, I'm gonna go talk to Pat. And then we ended up talking for like 2.5 hours just on like rookies. And, I've had Pat on my show a couple of times. He invited me onto his show. And so, like, that was instant connection right there. And so if you are in this space and want to network, it's an amazing opportunity to go there and network with people, because there's so many people in this space. The way you separate yourself is really by building relationships, showing people who you are. And, if you're just another Twitter handle, like, not everyone knows who you are, especially when there's so many of us. But going out and making relationships and meeting people, like that's why we're connected right here.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And yes, exactly. And I've gotten so many people to come on the show because I met them at the expo, or because, we had some sort of connection where they were going to be there or whatever. And I'm like, oh, then you have to come on my show. Right. And so it's really cool to get to see people in person and get to know the personalities behind, the Twitter handle, like you were saying. And we're not calling it X. We'll never call it X. It'll always be Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know when you're listening to this, but if you're listening to it in the far future, it was Twitter before it was X. Anyway. So with the expo, I mean, there's a ton of events that happen there, and there's a lot of, like you said, the networking thing. How do you go about networking? I know a lot of people who are first starting off in the fantasy football space, they don't really know, like, they don't want to come off as like too much too soon or anything like that. But how do you kind of go about navigating that?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you got to do is introduce yourself. And so you don't have to go out there and try to be the funniest guy in the room or the smartest guy in the room, or, if you want to try to do that, go ahead. But like, I remember last year, like, I got there Thursday night and I got to like do the small crowd thing, and it helped me warm up to everybody before I went out. And the next day I see a guy, and he was like literally like shaking, like he's shaking. And I'm like, hey man, my name's David. Nice to meet you. And I was like, let me just bring you over and let me, introduce you to some of the guys. And Howard Bender was there, and, and we just started talking. And at the end, he's like, I was just like shocked by how many people, and nervous to talk to them. And so, like, for me, do that for other people, like, especially if you're like, I'm an extrovert, so I can do that stuff. And so other people aren't. And I know it's uncomfortable. And so, like, I know when we do our stuff for work and we do our Myers-Briggs, I'm like way over here on the scale, and everyone else is over here. And that's just who we are. But
Yeah.
like, that, just go there, talk to people. And if you have, you're trying to get a job, you're trying to, do whatever, tell people, like, you have to be honest about that and say, hey, do you know any places that are looking for writers right now, or anyone looking for podcast hosts? Or do you know any places that are paying? Like, I'm doing articles for people and nobody's paying me anything. And I'm trying to get somewhere where I'm actually getting compensated. Hey, I know this guy's looking, and people will help you out.
For real, people will help you out. When I first started, I had no idea. I was like freaking out when my name would get mentioned on somebody's podcast. Like, that would just be like, oh my gosh, they're answering my question or whatever, and then kind of making those relationships stick. And I don't know, it's just been a wild ride getting to meet everybody, and Twitter and the expo just being like summer camp for fantasy football fans. It's just, I don't know. It's a heartwarming thing, for real though, for real.
It
And,
is.
and like, like you said, like we wouldn't have this connection, and I wouldn't have, met so many people there. And I'm sure you met a lot of people that you didn't even know existed until that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you have these minor interactions with people, and like, don't get me wrong, there's some people that I talk to on Twitter that I like. Popes, like I talk to him every day, and so like I talk to him more than most of my friends from high school and college, and so being able to sit down, have a beer with him, and talk to him in person, and give him a hug was awesome, and so you have that with certain people, and like some people, like they recognize you and they come up and same thing, like you see them and you're like, I don't know the name, but I know the face.
Right.
And so you're able to go and put things together. And so that for me, that was the coolest part, being able to put the names and the faces together. And most of the people are exactly who you interact with on Twitter. Honestly, I'd never met a bad person at the expo. Like everyone's super cool. But like all the people there, like their personalities are their personalities.
For sure. For sure. And you've never met a bad person from the fantasy space in person, but have you ever stumbled across anybody in the fantasy, coming in either saying like, oh, your takes are trash or something like that? You get those trolls or whatever.
Oh, there's so many people out there, and everyone thinks that they're the smartest guy in the room. They think it's, they're trying to get clout by making fun of people, bullying people, and I've had those. And for me, like, I don't interact with them. So, like, and we first started, that was kind of a problem because I'm managing the handle with my buddy. My buddy doesn't have the PR skills that I do. And so he's getting fights with everybody. I'm like, listen, I can't take you anywhere, man. And so like me, like if somebody wants to argue with me about my take, I put something up 2 years ago and I said Travis Etienne is better than Najee Harris. This is like before the draft. And then, somebody quote tweeted me, was like, oh, this is it's stupid season, yada yada. And then I put up like, hey, what are your player comparisons for these players? Same person quote tweeted me and was like, ban player comps. And I just DM'd him, was like, hey man, like I was like, I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not, but like what like, are we good? And he was like, yeah, man, I don't like that stuff. And I was like, that's fine. Like you can unfollow me.
Yeah.
If you don't like it. But like, and I have no beef with that person, but like that kind of stuff where they were trying to get to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen some people being pretty rude and nasty to people on there. I know there's the fantasy receipts who like to call people out for their mistakes. And I think that stuff, if it's done in fun, yeah, like we've all had bad takes. We've all made,
That's why I don't give fantasy advice anymore.
Like, but like you go out there and you can't be afraid of someone like the fantasy receipts or something like that to like say that you're like you got something wrong.
Right.
It's like whatever, but you give the energy you put out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm only going to give out positive vibes.
Right on. Yeah. I remember somebody commenting something kind of bleh on an article that I wrote, and that was like the first time I had seen something bad, and I was like just like feeling my skin turning red and just feeling like panicky about this person I've never even had a conversation with before in my entire life. And it did take a while to learn. If you go back and listen to early episodes of this podcast, I'm like, oh, I love interacting with the trolls, F the trolls, this, that, and the other. And now I'm like, okay, no, you don't need to do all of that stuff. So
it's tough. I mean, I remember my first time putting stuff out on Reddit, and I'm like, I would be nervous about putting stuff back out on Reddit. And like Reddit is so much meaner than Twitter. And so like the difference is Reddit actually reads your stuff. So on the one hand, you're getting 50 comments about the fact that you had a typo, the fact that you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this guy. And then, but you're like, those 50 guys actually read it. Well, maybe 20 of them tell me to turn the ad blocker off, and then 30 of them actually read it. But like Twitter, you'll put out this article that you spent 2 or 3 hours on, and you got like 30 shares and 30 likes, and nobody read it.
Right.
So give me the trolls, the people that are actually reading it. And, I usually just comment and say, hey, thanks for catching that. Appreciate you checking it out. Appreciate you reading this. And, but yeah, Reddit, if you don't have thick skin, don't post your stuff on Reddit because they are ruthless.
Yeah, I've never been on the fantasy football side of Reddit, so I don't use Reddit a whole lot. But yeah, I don't know. So, but I do need to open up my audience to more people.
The bosses like it. If you want clicks and you want views, that's where you go because they do actually consume the content if the moderators allow it. I put one of my Dynasty price checks up there. People were like, man, this is the kind of content that I like. If someone wants to put content out, this is exactly what you need to do. Like, man, Reddit finally likes me. It had like 300 comments. Everybody was like talking all about it. It was Anthony Richardson. And then I posted another one like 3 days later. And the first comment was, no, mega thread on Friday. This is deleted.
Wow.
And I was like,
you're okay. Like, man, seriously?
And so I'm like, that's over. And so, I mean, I've had that before. I put an article up and they're like, no. And just like the moderators will take it down. So you got to navigate Reddit a little bit. It's not like Twitter where you can just put whatever you want.
I like learning new things. So like, I feel like I learn a lot about YouTube talking to all of y'all as well, because I don't dabble in that at all, but
YouTube shorts, do some YouTube shorts. Like I said earlier, I was talking to Nick and he was like, hey, I stole your idea. And all I do is just, you can screenshot a news, like Travis Kelce news today. I saw it. I was in the middle of a meeting and I'm like, shit. Then like the meeting got done, screenshotted it. It's the green screen background of my, TikTok. And I'm like, hey guys, breaking news. Travis Kelce hyperextended his knee, 8-second video, put it up there. And then I put it up on, I can use the same vertical video, put it on a YouTube short, and people like short form content. And so they're going to watch my 8-second video probably a lot more than my 18-minute video.
Right. Okay, I like this. And all of this makes sense, and all of this is, I like to take notes too, because one day I'll take you guys' advice and actually do something. But so how do you get your content out to the audience? How do you spread the word on the things that you're doing?
So the nice thing at SGPN is I got an editor, so he puts it all out. So I have to go on there and, for those that don't write, if you do, a lot of times companies are going to use, WordPress or other software where you have to put it in there, and then you have to, meet certain criteria to make sure that it's passes the editorial, and then the editors put it out. And they also put out our podcast too. And so that goes out to, different places. And then of course I got to self-promote. So I put my stuff out on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. I don't really mess with Instagram that much, but I probably should. And then I do Reddit from Feeling Brave.
Sounds okay. So you brought up Dynasty price check earlier, and for the people who are listening that want to know what that is all about, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so in Dynasty, we're always trying to know like what the current value is, and a lot of these, a lot of times like crowdsourcing is the best way to really know, because the people on Critter are just like the people in your leagues, and so instead of like, because like most calculators and stuff that like, and I'm not hating on the calculators, but like that's typically like one guy's rankings or two guys' rankings, and that's the values, and so what I do is I just do, okay, this is Anthony Richardson verse, and I put him verse every single player in a thread, and then you'll see the votes, and you'll see that, Richardson was got 25% of the votes against Lamar Jackson, and he got 75% of the votes against Dak Prescott. And so then you can compare. And so when you're looking at your trades, it's giving you some ideas of, okay, well, if I want to move down, there's this player and it looks like there's a pretty wide gap. So I can probably add a second round pick in, or add a player that's worth a second round pick. Give us some ideas. Plus it's just a fun way to interact with people. because I'll put requests. Hey, give me a request if you want to, a dynasty player value, and it does start conversations because people are like, "Wow, I had no idea Jahmyr Gibbs was already the RB2." And I'm like, I mean, it's the way it is, man. That's the way that the dynasty is. It's all about the new hotness with the running backs.
Yes, it is. So, how do you come up with the ideas for your podcast? Because I know a lot of people, myself included, kind of get stumped when we're trying to come up with ideas for things.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to get some evergreen content out there. And so like if you do week 1 stuff, it's only good for week 1. And so having evergreen content out there that people can use, for a couple weeks or so, like trade targets or you look at sleepers and busts and post type sleepers and things, and kind of your general stuff that people are going to look for. But for me, it's like, especially in the dynasty space, you have to come and go with what's happening. And so you have your evergreen content, but like after, week 1, we're going to want to know like rookie stock reports, what rookies actually played, kind of looking at what's, a deeper dive at like, all right, it's not all about fantasy points. How many routes did they run? How many snaps did they play? What kind of opportunities that they got? Because you can see, like, you saw the breakout coming with some people last year, like with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. You knew it was coming because you saw the opportunities just grow and grow and grow. It's like these guys are on the field for 99% of the snaps. Their route participation's 95%. They're going to get the ball.
And with Dynasty, I know it's easier to put content out all year long, but how do you make sure during the off season that you're staying fresh, and how do you come up with what you're going to do during the off season?
Yeah, the off season is much easier for Dynasty content because there's content you can put out every single day on singular players or teams or whatever. It's harder during the year, but you kind of, again, you get into the flow of it. So like the first month is, you're not going to have a whole lot of changing to your dynasty rankings like you would your weekly rankings. But after the first month, I'm going to put out a dynasty report, and I'm going to say, this is the dynasty stock report. This is who's up and who's down after the first month of football. And you're going to have trade targets probably after the first couple of weeks. You're going to have ads and drops, sleepers and stashes, like those kind of things where like I said earlier, like you may not have a guy that's popping off on the fantasy points, but you see it coming. And those are your guys that you're like, that's a stash, that's a sleeper, or like your cuts. It's like, all right, it's time to say goodbye. Like, please, Will Fuller should not be on your team anymore.
Wah, wah.
He's probably like 13% rostered.
Probably. Yeah. I was looking at a couple of my dynasty leagues before we had to have our cuts in to make it the certain amount of players. And I'm like, why do I still have this guy still on my league? Why do I still have this guy clogging up my roster? Like, nah.
Yeah.
But no Will Fuller.
That happens.
So, okay, we have football that's about to be here. So, like, real soon. Like, it's exciting time. People out there listening to this right now, it may be far in the future and football's already been on. But this is the time where we're very, very, very excited because it's the eve, it's coming up. It's almost here. And when you watch football, how is watching football with you? Like, what is the experience like, and how do you get into a football game, or what is the experience like on Sunday?
Well, since my son's been born, it's pretty much it's us watching the games. So it'll be my son and myself, and he usually gets pretty amped up watching the game. So he's trying to tackle me or trying to play. Of course, I'm trying to keep up with what's going on. So I got the Sunday ticket and I got the 8 games up on the TV. And so I'm here at the house hanging out with my son watching the game. I'm not going to the bar, not doing a lot of drinking or anything like that. Just watching the game, keeping up with the fantasy and For me, like, especially with Dynasty, it's important you try to consume as much as you can. I'm not going and watching replays of all the games on Monday and Tuesday. Like, I have a day job that I have to do. But watching those games, you can see a lot, even if you're not even listening to it. You can see a lot. And, whether it's, the guy getting a lot of opportunities, a lot of big plays, a lot of times there's plays that are called back, or whether it's a penalty or, like this guy got stopped at the goal line. Like, there's things that don't show up on the box score that you can see by watching the game.
And do you watch college football too, or how is that?
I watch some, but I will say that most time I'm spending Saturdays with the family.
Gotcha. So what do you like to do in your free time, or when you have a chance to do something fun? What do you like to do?
I'm just spending time with the family. My son's he's in flag football right now, so we're doing that. We went the other day and saw WWE. Then we went Friday. What did we do Friday? We did something. Forget what we did. And then just really spending time with the fam. My wife, she's from Dominican Republic, and so she's got family here. But usually, once a year we'll spend some time over in the DR.
And how does the family feel about your fantasy football love and how much you put into it?
Yeah, my wife's really supportive. And so we went to the Friday night. We went to the football game Friday. That's what we did. But my wife's really supportive. She knows, this is something that I do not only as part-time job, but for fun. And so, as long as I'm let her know what I'm doing, she's good. And I'm usually here on the house, geeking out, talking fantasy football with people. So it's pretty harmless.
And when you're not putting out content, but you're taking content in, what kind of content do you like to take in? Do you listen to podcasts? Is there specific topics you are really interested in, or do you like to read? What exactly is?
It's podcasts. Like, I don't have a lot of free time because it's either spending time with the family, putting out content, or working. But like, I travel a lot for work, and so I have an hour and a half commute to the site sometimes. And so I will knock out a podcast or two on the way there. And so it's a nice way for me to consume content, learn about other people's thoughts and ideas and takes. And so for me, I don't listen to just fantasy football podcasts. I listen to football podcasts. So I'm listening to Move the Sticks to learn about the rookies. And so I'm not only learning about the running backs, I'm learning about the linemen and the linebackers and the safeties. I got to go to the NFL Combine this year and be part of the media. And so I got to meet the players and talk to the players this year, which is a unique experience. But yeah, listen to podcasts either when I'm going for a walk or in the car. That's how I consume content.
Okay, so going to the NFL Combine, what was that experience like? Did you have any memories that kind of stick out?
Yeah. It was sick. Like, I got my credentials literally like after the deadline because I had to wait to get registered. The guys got me the credentials. I live in Indianapolis, so it was just able to go down there. So I go there, and it was quarterback day. So there's just like all this media and all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't belong here, And so I was a couple fantasy guys that were in the space, like Jake from Fantasy Headliners and Kyle Richardson. So I went and talked to those guys and met some other people that I knew. Dustin Levke, he had DM'd me before it. So him and I became friends after that. And so I remember getting there, and I'm like, I got to try to get a question of Bryce Young. Got to get all this stuff like Bryce Young. And I realized quickly, like, you have 10 players, and it's like speed dating. They all come out, and 20 minutes later, they do a hockey change. It's new guys. So I'm not going to get an opportunity to talk to any of these other guys. So I heard the first Bryce Young question, and then I turned around and got out of the crowd. And I remember, like, Justin Shorter, I felt so bad for him. For 5 minutes, he just heard Anthony Richardson questions. And the further away from that main table you got was kind of the lesser known guys. And so you got to have some like kind of one-on-one experience. And so like I remember talking to Elijah Higgins and like got to like really talk to him. A.T. Perry told us a story about how Sam Hartman literally pulled out his rib in a plastic bag at the team meeting. You learn their personalities because some of the players like they really have like Tyjae Spears, like he's got a dynamic personality. And so he's someone that like is just a fun guy. A couple of the guys, I won't name names, were just not really talkers. But like some of the guys, I'm like, that's the superstar. Like Anthony Richardson, he like lit up the room. You can tell that he was, he had like just star power. And then like I remember my the unique experience was I see a player like off in the corner, just stand at the podium by himself, nobody talking to him. I'm like, I'm gonna go talk to him. And it's Zach Evans, who I like a lot. And so it was just me and him. And so I'm talking to him, just getting to just talk to him. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna ask some fantasy football questions because no one else is around. I won't be embarrassed. So I asked him like his Madden moment, those kind of things. I asked him if he knew about fantasy football, if he's ready for people to DM him on Sundays. And he was like, well, if I'm playing enough that you guys know enough about me, then I'm doing right. So like I'm good with that. It was a lot being able to just to learn, and then it was different. The draft was different, like I wanted every single one of players that I met to get drafted. And when they didn't, like Rakim Jarrett, I said his name wrong in my YouTube and his dad corrected me. So I actually went to Rakim Jarrett and apologized. And I was like, hey, your dad corrected me. I want to apologize. And it's Rakim and not Rakim, correct? And he was like, yes. And I was like, and I want to give you the opportunity to correct everybody here. And so he corrected, the people in the crowd because, and then just being able to like Zay Flowers interacting. He was a cool guy. Like seeing him, he was interacting with somebody's dog and he had Sour Patch. So I'm like, you're learning little things about the players,
Yeah, and that's super cool. And having people that you're rooting for is really cool because you met them. That's really rad. I met a few athletes like Cortland Sutton, and he was like the greatest guy ever, right? So then you're like rooting for that. So is there an athlete that you haven't met before that you would like to meet or would be like a dream to be able to meet?
Oh man. Oh, as a Giants fan, Michael Strahan would be, he's so big time. I'll say personality wise, give me one of anyone from the Good Morning Football, whether it's Kay Adams or Nate Burleson. I know he's not there anymore, but Kyle Brandt, like those guys are just awesome.
Yes, and Michael Strahan just seems like he would be a cool guy to meet. So,
yeah.
Do you have any favorite players that are playing right now? Anybody that you root for when they're out playing, whether it be a Giants player or anybody outside of the Giants organization?
Well, of course, my son Jacob on his flag football team. That's my number
Of course.
one. I love Austin Eckler and how he embraces fantasy football. I think that's a different. Not a lot of players do. And so I really like how he embraces fantasy football and that becomes part of his brand. It's really hard to not cheer for guys like JJ Watt and the people that really give back to the community. Like those guys are super easy to cheer for.
Yeah. And speaking of giving back to the community, giving back is a big thing in the fantasy football space. You had brought up charity leagues earlier, and Scott Fishbowl is a big charity league. There's a lot of them now. It's awesome to see them continuing to pop up. Are you in the Scott Fishbowl, or have you participated in that?
Yeah, so I got to go to the live draft in Cincinnati. I didn't even draft. I just was there hanging out, and I did a card break. So I bought a bunch of cards, and then people donated money to buy teams. And so if you gave me $10, you got all the Cowboys cards, and you gave me $10, you got all the Eagles cards. And then so I went to Cincinnati, did that. That was fun. They had the guy from Cocaine, the guy that owns the trademark for Cocaine Bear. He was there, and Houday, the Bengals mascot, was there. And, it was cool seeing Chuck Bass, and a couple other friends there. Andrew Hall is the one that invited me. And then I am in Scott Fishbowl. I am in the ramen division.
Okay. Dope. And so I'm sure that being a live event, like we already talked about live drafts being awesome. And I'm sure that it being a Scott Fishbowl event was even more amazing. And that just sounds super rad. We did the Dallas one, and that one was super rad. And so I can only imagine the people you were naming off sound like they'd be, I've hung out with some of them, but they do seem like they'd be a blast. So,
oh yeah. Drew Davenport was there. I can't think of everybody's names right now, but yeah, it was definitely fun to do.
So before we wrap everything up, I just kind of wanted to get a little bit more for people that are listening that are just trying to get started in the industry and they don't really know where to start or what they need to be doing. What kind of advice would you give for somebody that's just brand new and clean slate? They don't have anything in front of them yet, and just some sort of advice that you would give a newbie.
Just try something. If you want to do it, do what you're most comfortable with first. And so if you're willing to go out on a show and just talk, do it. But make sure that you do, try something. And so whether it's a blog, it's going and answering a bunch of questions somewhere else, like figure out what you want to do. And then if you want to get better at it, you have to be honest with yourself. And you can't just think that like the first time you did it was perfect.
And also,
we got some thunder and lightning.
We got some here. Storms going on. Lucky you, I guess. I don't know if it's lucky or not, but we haven't had rain in forever. So
yeah, it's going down.
Yeah. So we might, well, good thing we're coming to an end, but just before we do plug all your stuff, is there anything that you want to do in the future when it comes to fantasy football space that you haven't done yet? Or where do you see yourself in the future when it comes to putting out content?
I don't know. I'm pretty good where I'm at. Like I said, for me, you got to have balance. So of course I'd like to work with more people, like to do more shows. And of course, getting on bigger shows and things like that would be a cool experience. I'd love to do what I did with the combine again, but do it at the draft, do it at the Super Bowl, would be an awesome experience. So I think that's what I'd like to do this year. I think I'm going to try to go see if I can get the media passes and go to a Colts game and just be part of the media for that. That'd be cool.
This sounds fun. Hopefully it gets to happen. And well, now that we're coming to the end, can you go ahead and just let everybody know who you are, where they can find your stuff, and all of that jazz?
Yeah, it's Dave Heilman, and it's Dynasty Dorks, one word. So Dynasty Dorks on Twitter, Dynasty Dorks on TikTok, Dynasty Dorks on Reddit. And so DMs are always open. If you guys got fantasy football questions or want me to run a poll for you or something like that, always willing to do that. And I work for Sports Gambling Podcast Network, so you can find my work there. On YouTube, it's SGPN Fantasy Football. Same thing on Spotify and Apple.
Excellent. Well, Dave, thank you again for coming on. It was fun, and make sure that you guys stay safe and all the lightning and the thunder out there.
It got dark.
Stay inside. Yes. So anyway, everybody, I appreciate you listening, and it's getting okay. Well, anyway, make sure you guys tune in next time for another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem, or stick around and go listen to some more. And remember to stay rad.
Get real. Time to get real, everybody.